Hello.
If you can unmute your video for a little bit, you don't have to leave it that way, but just at the beginning so we can start to get an idea of who is who on the basis of face, that would be great. I know it's like Hollywood Squares, if you've ever seen that show, but it's just, I think it works better at the beginning, at least. So try to unmute your video and we'll wait a few minutes. It's only just 2 now, so. And in the meantime, did anybody here that's here have any problems with the assignment or problems with Photoshop or your computer or anything that you want to discuss before we get started? Everything went pretty well, or?
Yeah.
Everything worked.
You were able to upload your work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, 9 people are here. Any other concerns? I mean, how are you feeling that the pacing of assignments is working for you? Or this new one, I'm going to give you 2 weeks. So especially for people that have just sort of started getting up to speed because you had Chromebook issues or whatever the thing was, do you feel that you can catch up by the 8th of October, which is 2 weeks for the next assignment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Great. Anybody feeling overwhelmed that you can't do that or need extra time? Okay, good. That's great, because I want to spend as much time as we need with the layering process, because that's key to Photoshop and that's really what it does best. So it can be the trickiest thing too, depending, especially on your system. So if we spend another week on that, I think that's good just for practice. If you finish one image for the assignment 4 and you want to do another one, you can always start another one, you know, if you enjoy doing it, but one is you just need to upload 1 image for to complete the assignment. Oops, 2 more people. Okay, so what are we at now? All right, yeah, and if you can unmute video for a little bit, you can always put it back on later if you need to, but just for the beginning of class when we're talking about each other's work, I think it's helpful to have your camera on if you can. Okay, so I'll make sure nobody else is waiting. So where did you all end up uploading your work to? I know we've been having issues with Flickr. Anybody like Flickr that you want to keep posting there? Because I took the link off Blackboard because I found it frustrating. I used to like putting my own photos there, but using a group I found very frustrating. And I got a couple of emails where people said they couldn't find or really follow the process from uploading from an individual account to a group. But if anybody really likes it, you can keep posting there. I just want to know who is putting stuff there, so I'm sure to check it. Does anybody else find it frustrating if you have used it? Did you? I mean, it's interesting to see how the different sort of photo products that are supposed to, enable sharing and community among artists kind of differ a lot. It's really hard to find one that's very user friendly. So if you do find one, let me know. But right now I'm just finding that Blackboard works best and is really designed more for what we want to do with sharing our images. Let me see if anybody else is up here. So I did take that link off the Blackboard page for that in Facebook because people weren't using Facebook. So this has been interesting testing the different sharing options that are out there for education. But right now I think having everything unified as much as possible as we can on Blackboard is going to be the easiest way to go. Okay. So, all right, if you don't have a camera, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah, and thanks. I have the chat up now on my screen, so you can keep posting in chat. I'll glance at it from time to time and try to keep caught up. Okay, yeah, I hear you about the Wi-Fi, Marissa, because I'm having the same problem here. Do you have Comcast by any chance?
Well, I'm currently like staying on campus and they've been having like trouble like nonstop with the Wi-Fi, so I'm not really sure.
Oh, that's interesting because Blackboard was really slow. Is it just been today? I wonder if it's
it's been like all week.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. I'm glad because I wondered if something was going on their end or my end, but all right.
It's
so
over here too.
It's what?
Comcast, it keeps going in and out.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. If it happens today, maybe, I mean, it's windy here. It does that when it's windy too. So I'll just restart the meeting if it happens. My computer cut out in the middle of last meeting, right at the moment we were going to take a break. So the timing was good, but you never know. Oh. Okay, so most people have loaded on Blackboard. Did anybody, between your portfolios and the text discussions, how many of you added things to the final portfolios folder that you have on Blackboard? Did you mostly post in text discussions? No, we'll go through how to do it because we're going to look at them today, so don't worry. So I'm going to say Wendy, just because this is the name that's coming up here. What is your first name? Because I know that's probably not your account. Darajane, is that right?
Yeah, that's my last name.
And what's your first name?
Wendy is actually.
Is your Wendy your first name? Okay, I wasn't sure if
Yes.
I had somebody else's account. I mean, that happens when you're using somebody in the family. So, okay, great first name. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify. So
Yeah.
I wasn't calling you by not your first name. So yeah, if anybody else doesn't have their name up, if you can put it up, that is even more helpful right now. Than a photo, just so I can keep track of who's been coming to class. All right, so we'll get started. I think first, I'll share the screen and we can look at the work that you did this week. And then if you have any questions about something else that someone did, you can just speak up, or you can do the hand raise symbol, or you can type in chat. If you are putting a comment in chat, just make sure you're letting the person know that it's about the image that's there, or write their name down, and that would be helpful. So let me make sure that I have, I'm gonna close this. Blackboard up, and I'm gonna go to share screen. Okay, so can you all see the screen for our Blackboard page? Okay,
Yeah.
great. And before we do that, just a couple of new things. The current assignment, which we'll go over, is in current assignments. The past assignments, I just put the black and white one in there. If you still need to refer to it, it's now in past assignments, and I'm going to keep just putting the older assignment into this past assignment so you have a list that you can refer to at the end when you're starting to maybe revise some of these assignments. Final portfolios is another option for you to upload your work. I think it's probably easier if we just put the current work in the final portfolios as a way to look at it, if you don't want to just put it in the text discussion area. And that way, I mean, you can always take these out. Once you put a file up here, it's not stuck there. You can delete it at any time. So don't worry that you will have something up there that's not finished, that you put up a work in progress And then it may be there at the end of the semester as a final, because you can delete and re-add images at any time. So it can really be a working folder for you to store things. So feel free to use that. I think it's probably going to be our best option besides the text discussions. And then in instructional videos and PowerPoints, we'll go over a couple of these websites. These are the two best free copyright image sources. When we get to the demonstration, we'll come back and look at that. But I'll always put the Zoom recordings of the demonstration, not the whole class, just the demonstration part if we have one, up here in Zoom recordings. So if you're forgetting what we went through in class, make sure you check here under instructional videos and PowerPoints, because you can look at the Zoom and review what we did in class step by step. And that may help you solve whatever problem you're having during the week. Okay, so text discussions. We'll look at the images that we have here and discuss them. And then go into, we have a video to look at, and then we can go through the next assignment. So I guess I'll start down here and go up this time, since we went from the top to the bottom last time. Okay, so you can read through the comments, and then we'll go to the picture. Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so Marissa, do you want to describe what, now that the picture is up, what exactly you pieced together and how you did it and why you made the choices that you made?
So I'm still like working in progress with it, because I want to add more like things to do with like space wise, because I was gonna make like the planets, I think, like either a little bit bigger than they are in there, but I also wanted to explain that like I wanted to choose like the ocean, because like there's always like that saying, like, it's something just like where it's
Okay, you might want to mute. Okay, here you go, hang on. Okay. All right, I think you're good. You can go ahead, Marissa.
okay.
Sorry.
So basically I just kind of wanted to like show like the struggle of like being alienated kind of, and how like sometimes like the ocean leaves the shore kind of thing, trying to like, I guess, like go back to the shore. So it's like more so to do with like someone themselves like in the center. I wanted to like obviously like feather out the edges. I just didn't get to doing that yet because I wanted to add stuff. But I wanted to play around like with her like being in the center, like floating up to like space kind of.
Okay.
But I'm still in like the middle process of like trying to edit everything.
So what are the separate parts? Is it the planets and then the water background? And then
Yeah, so
then we're having a Bridgewater moment. So, if you guys, while she's hesitating, I mean on pause, sort of, do you want to type any comments that you have or make any suggestions? Does it get the feeling across that she's talking about? Okay, Marissa's back. So go ahead. You hesitated for a bit. It's Bridgewater.
yeah, the water
Yeah.
coming in and out, so it keeps freezing. But yeah, I just kind of want to like create the sense of like alienation and struggle, I guess. But I wanted to like either size the planets a little bit larger, and maybe like place some things like down, like the lower end of it, to at least create more of like a foreground of the image. But I wasn't sure yet.
So what do you guys think? Do you think it needs more in the foreground to tell the story that she's trying to tell? Does it feel like it's an alienated subject? Whoops, no. There we go, okay. Let me just stretch the window a bit, there we go. To me, yeah, I think, it's working really well. subject-wise, I like the woman. I mean, it seems like she's alienated, but also hopeful in a way. Is that kind of what you're trying to get across?
Yeah.
I mean, I just say that because I can see like, I mean, sort of where that was the smudge tool that kind of you pushed around the edges a little bit. I mean, it almost
want to make it like smoother, like feather it out a little bit, but I was gonna play around with like different contrasts too, with like other like things maybe I could probably add, but I wasn't sure yet.
okay, or you could try a textured brush maybe, but yeah, I think, yeah, it might help to feather it a little bit more. I like the way that looks like that. So it looks like it's not just a human figure. She's maybe like, you know, made of electricity or, you know, there's light emanating from the figure, which is nice, which makes me, I mean, that's why I said it looks hopeful, but I mean, it looks like she's struggling to rise, but it's also kind of hopeful. But was this reflection here in the water right here? Or did you add that? I mean, it looks like a reflection of her leg, which is.
It kind of does, but I didn't know if I should like keep it there or not, so I just kind of left it at the moment.
Yeah, I might even emphasize that a little more. It really puts that figure into the scene. I mean, that kind of thing, shadows, reflections, sometimes cast shadows can really set the figure into the scene when they weren't there before and create the illusion that you're creating a world that's fictional but real, where you can't tell where the seams are. And I think that helps to do that with that. You might want to push it around so it matches with the waves on the highlights or something, but it reads as a reflection. And as soon as I saw that, I mean, it's in the arm too. I thought that was really nice. The only other thing I'd kind of watch design-wise is just where this planet, you're going to resize them anyway, but where it hits the horizon right here. You know, in any kind of design or painting, it's called a tension point, when two things collide right at the point that they end. That immediately creates a focal point where your eye goes to. So unless you want the viewer's eye to go there and connect and unite those two objects, then you want to either move it down a little bit or up a little bit, or maybe cut it off right at the horizon, because then the planet would drop to the back.
Okay.
So you could practice with cropping that. I mean, that's just a nitpicky thing, but that's the first thing when I see something, you know, that meets like that, I look at. But I love the water image, looks great. And I don't know if I would add anything to the front of it. I mean, you could leave it like that, or you could experiment with adding some objects close up or something. But I think because of the arc in the water, it looks complete. So that was a nice photo choice. So really good job with this assignment for the first real, you know, collaging assignment that we did. And I am looking forward to see what else you do with the figure, because I think that's a great start. And, you know, it looks like it's almost finished. So great job.
Thank you.
Any other suggestions or chat questions? I can't see the chat when I go to Zoom screen. So you're still free to, you know, type in comments. So let me go back and pick up another one. Okay, so Kaylee, are you here? No. She may have put her work into the final portfolio, because I don't see a link for it. So I'm going to go look. Oh, I'm still in. There we go. I was just working on it before I got on here, so. Okay, so here's your final portfolios. If you haven't used this yet, you just click over final portfolios, and each one of you is kind of an individual in a group. That's the only way I can make Blackboard allow you to upload without having my password or using your own password, which it won't do. So when you find your name, you just click on your portfolio and then go to File Exchange. And this is when you're uploading images and looking at them. Okay, so she has her cultural icon, but not the new assignment there, but that's okay. I just wanted to check and show this at the same time. When you're uploading your images this way, then you want to go to Add File here, And once you click add file, it's going to give you a menu that allows you to search your computer for your file name. Try to upload a JPEG, PNG file, one or the other. Blackboard has trouble here with PDF or PSD files, Photoshop files. It'll send me out to try to look for them in the program, and then not open it. So JPEG only. But then you just attach the file, say submit, and then you have to go back each time you add a file, go back to the name, back to the folder. I mean, then go back to add file and file exchange, go through that process again. But this is a nice secure place to upload your work, and it's easy for us to look at it. Next week, if you do that for the next assignment, you can just, write in a chat or just let me know that that's where you've stored your work. If it's not over here in text discussions, and that's where we'll look for it. But okay. So Liliana, let's look at this one. Okay, great. Okay, so what are the different parts that you put together for this, and what did you do to the image to construct it?
So the different parts of it are the image of the girl, like in the top left corner, the person screaming in the center, the hands in the bottom right, and the smoke are all different images that I combined together.
Wow. So what do you guys think? Any comments? What kind of impression does this give you when you see it?
Struggle.
You see that right away? You feel like that
Yeah.
does connote.
Because the prison in the hand, just means a struggle, and depression. The yell is probably anger, but it's like a mix of emotions.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to go for.
That's true. So did you see depression there? I mean, is that sort of the dominant,
Mostly yes, because there's been a lot of depression during teens year, and sometimes people commit suicide. But that's why I'm
Right.
thinking,
Yeah, in the description of it, I wrote that I wanted to focus on the struggle of mental illness, and really I wanted it to feel like it could be up to interpretation on any type of mental struggle, and what resonates most with the person viewing it. But yeah, it does focus on mental struggles like depression, anxiety, other forms, anything like that.
Yeah, any other comments? Do you agree that that really speaks towards the concept that she's trying to, her interpretation of struggle?
I think so. I put it in chat, but I'll just say it. I
Yeah.
really like the placement of the hands on the bars, considering it's the brain's kind of like a prison for this person, so it does show
Right.
that mental struggle.
Yeah, I like the placement of that too, because it kind of sneaks up on you. I thought it was a strong composition before I opened the window all the way, and that was a nice surprise over in that lower left-hand corner. And that can be a real interesting place in a composition to add something that's either supporting but requires a lot of attention, or is actually the dominant content there, and then the rest of the image is supporting content. So this could go either way. But I love how that highlight on the face that's diagonal frames that, and yeah, the placement of it being where the brain is. That's really, really amazing. That looks great. And I think this is perfect for that black and white palette. I mean, it's just, yeah. Were these images in color before you brought them in?
The only image that was in color was the hands on the bars, but the rest of them were in black and white before.
How did you feel about the hands on the bars before you converted it to black and white? Do you think that would have worked with this particular content?
Personally, I think that it looks better in black and white because it was kind of I feel like it might have worked, but that would have drawn more attention to the hands, and I wanted it to be it could go either way, and I didn't want there to be insane focal point, but the main focal point that I wanted was the center silhouette, and so I think it personally looks better with it all in black and white.
Yeah, does anybody not agree with that? Or would you like to see maybe the hands in color so that's a real dominant focal point? Yeah, I think the black and white, I mean, I love how it kind of crept up on me and it's a real powerful element, but you know, I had to look for it a little bit, which makes the image more interesting to me. I mean, it could work without that altogether because it's that diagonal is such a powerful compositional element of the face, but I really, really like that there. And it kind of breaks up the space a little bit, but this is really nice and soft up here. I like how this, you know, yeah, this represents the core of the brain here. You're kind of have this smoke emanating from this person that feels like, you know, she's trying to escape herself or something. I like that element. Was that part of the photograph of the woman screaming or?
No, I found a picture of smoke like on its own, and I erased it, but I changed the opacity of the eraser so it was like half, and so the background of it kind of like disappeared, I guess. So it got it looks like it's sitting on top of it, but also kind of like incorporated.
Yeah, that worked out great. That's a beautiful element because that really looks like it belongs. It looks like it's coming out of her mouth or, you know, her head, or it's just, but having that light, soft area compared to the dark bars in the bottom corner, that's a really nice sort of polarized focal point. That looks great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's really powerful. I mean, it's a great portfolio piece, I think. And this here is another thing just to point out. I mean, this is where one of those intersections occurs. And it's very subtle. It's where her body is kind of crossing over the mouth. But because it doesn't stop right at that highlight, it extends a little bit. I zoomed in too far. There. Because it extends a little bit, just that tiny bit of extension beyond that line of the highlight of the mouth makes it not be one of those tangent points where you look to it and it's kind of disturbing. It really puts the body behind, or it feels like it's emanating from the mouth, but it's not like stuck at that point. So that was a really nice design choice. And you can see it just zoomed out how powerful it is, the hands. That's just like, yeah, that's incredible. I think that's a really, really nice piece. Good job. And, you know, it shows how powerful black and white can be. I mean, Photoshop has so many colors, millions of colors, but you don't have to use them all. You can be picky about your palette and you can restrict the colors. You can work in monochrome, or, you know, this week we're going to look at selective palette of color, but sometimes a limited palette is more powerful, and I think that really works. Great job. And I bet that will print beautifully. Do you have a printer at home where you can print your work? Anybody? Or
I do have a printer at home.
did you try printing it?
No, I'm at school right now, but I am going home for the weekend, so I'll try printing it when I'm home.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I do have a printer too also. So.
Are you gonna try printing some of your work, or have you tried?
I haven't tried yet, but I'll definitely give it a chance.
Yeah, you should. I think that you can learn a lot from printing. I mean, I wish we were in the classroom just because we usually look at the prints to critique them rather than the screen images, because you can pick up a lot more compositional detail from the print sometimes. But it's good to print things out, take a look at it, see what's working in the composition on the print. Sometimes you'll see things that don't work there that you need to go back and change in the Photoshop image where you might not have noticed it. But that came out really well. I'm gonna have to let my dog in while I'm loading this one. He's blind and he's almost deaf, so he'll just sit out there and bark until I let him in. Okay, let's see. Okay, so Clayton, did you upload your work anywhere? Are you here? Nope. I'm just going to check the final portfolios to see, because I just had an email exchange with him about doing that. So let's see if he did load it. Nope. All right. Okay, so Anthony, I know yours is here. Okay, let me zoom back in. Okay, so take a minute to look at this. I'm just gonna let my dog in. I'll be right back. And then you can also make chat comments on it if you want to. But yeah, I'll be right back. Okay. All right, so Anthony, you want to describe what the different sections are of the image, why you chose them, and what your interpretation of the concept is?
So the one on the left with the girl like hunched over the moon, that kind of reminds me of like insomnia, because when you're up late at night, all there is the moon and the stars. And then the girl is kind of like sad, so that's kind of tears, like depression, dripping down onto the girl that's the cartoony figure. And then I made it kind of look like, so the tears are dripping into her little puddle that she's dragging, because that's kind of like baggage, like, you know, like everything that people carry every day. And then the girl on the right she has three faces, because people only show you what they want to show you, because behind closed doors, they deal with a lot of other things like anxiety, PTSD, you know, all those type of social things.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's a nice interpretation of it. Why did you choose the cartoon character, you know, as opposed to a photographic one, just out of curiosity?
That was the only one I could find that like I felt like kind of matched the dripping into the little puddle that she's holding.
Okay, so what do you guys think? Does that work? Or do you think that, you know, he should try to construct something with just photos? Or do you like the addition of the cartoon, sort of different texture, different feeling, image collaged in there? And I know you can probably, you know, yeah, you can post in chat. Let me see if I can get to chat through more. No, it won't let me. But anyway, for me, I really do like that, because I don't know if you intended it, just because the other one feels like that sort of adult alienation, you know, and that, yeah, when you can't sleep, and it's something that kids don't always experience. Sometimes they do, but that's sort of more like nostalgic to me, because you have a cartoon character which looks like childhood, and how you kind of long for that when you're struggling as an adult, maybe. I mean, I don't know if you intended that, but.
No, I just thought it would match good, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people, especially with these collages, will always read different things into your collage, you know, and interpret things in different ways. I mean, some people don't care if they have control over that. Some people really want to have control over that. And you'll find in advertising, especially, they want to have control over that. So, you know, if somebody was going to put out an illustration like this, before they paid a lot of money to print it, they would probably have focus groups look at it and tell what their interpretation is, so they can pick up on any problem interpretation, for instance, before it goes out. But I think this is a really nice example of that. I like mixed genres in collages. I think it's interesting and adds a different texture, but there's always going to be that reference to, you know, if you put in a different medium, what does that medium mean? People are going to ask, why did that artist use that medium? Are they trying to symbolize something with that because it's a cartoon? And for me, that's kind of how I looked at it. But, you know, if that bothers you, you could try to construct something like that out of photographs. But, you know, in this case, I really like it because it seems very kind of sad and poignant, which the whole image feels like. So what other tools did you use in Photoshop to construct it as you put your pieces of it together?
Well, they were all colored, so I had to make them black and white. And then I used the smudge tool to kind of make it look like the two images are together. And then I smudged the drops from the moon. And then I tried to use the, what's that word that starts with the O?
The opacity. Yeah, we'll go
Yeah,
through that again today. Yeah.
I tried to use that, but all it did was make like the gray grayer or the black white. So I didn't really know how to use it that well.
Yeah, it's going to show transparency to the layers that are underneath in the layer stack. And if that's black or white, that's what's going to, you know, be added to the top image that you're making less opaque. So that's the tricky part with it, is having something underneath that you want to have show through. So we'll go through that all again in the demonstration, because we're going to do another collage for practice. And, you know, again, the more practice you can get with collaging, transparent, semi-transparent and opaque layers together in Photoshop, you know, that's good practice for doing Photoshop illustration. And then you'll really, you know, have control over the most powerful point in the medium. But I think for just starting with Photoshop, this is really a powerful illustration. I liked it when I opened it up right away. And, you know, this one is a little bit constructed in terms of, you know, being somebody's illustration up here. So you could have copyright issues with it, but for this, you know, we're just practicing. I think that it looks really nice. I like what you did with the hair over here to connect, you know, that really, if that was straight, it would separate into two different images, but just this little wave in it unites it with this image over here because of this sort of ragged edge. So I really like that. And that idea of unity, I mean, that's another of your design principles, that, you know, your images, even if they're very different, like this cartoon and then the photographic soft image behind it, they need to unite in some way or it's going to fall apart as a composition. And I think what unites these, I mean, again, it's your drops, yeah, coming right down into this, that's a connection. And then also that the palette is simplified and just black and white is another connection, so it works. This is another connection, waving the hair, so it has more in connection with this design over here. So all those are really important to think about the unity, how you're creating unity, but not having so much unity that it just falls apart and feels like oatmeal, so, or blends together too much. That's always the tricky part with collaging in Photoshop. And I think that you did a really nice job with the grayscale, very powerful, beautiful, like range of highlights to very dark darks, and then all those nice values in between. So, and I mean, I do like this cartoon over here a lot as a choice in there. I think it works with your design. So, yeah, really good job. All right. Any other comments? Questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the share for just a second. Okay, good. I'm glad you're making comments in chat. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. All right, good. Okay, so I think I'm going to introduce the next assignment, and then we'll look at a short video. It's only 8 minutes long. So, and then we'll take a little break, and then I'll do the demonstration. So back to share screen. And actually, I'm going to call it up first. I'm going to stop share. Because I had a little bit of trouble with this video when I tried to load it with share screen before, but let's see what happens. Okay, I put this video in your readings folder because it's not really an instructional video. And it's not, I didn't want to separate it out from the other things. But for your assignment this week, let's go back to share. There we go. Okay. There we go. So I added color and design in readings, and that has a few links to websites that talk about being very deliberate in color choices, how to build a palette. Have all of you taken a basic color theory class either at Bridgewater or in high school or another school? Okay, if you have not, read through all of these. They have a lot of information. This is the first one is an overview of color theory. It's an awesome site that somebody put together with palettes that illustrate your basic color theory concepts for digital design or, any kind of 2D, any kind of design. All these palettes are used for painting. But it's being deliberate about mixing colors, building palettes to try to get the feeling across that you're intending with your illustrations. And it has all the definitions, different color definitions you'll hear in design. These are all the basic ones here. And going through all those will make the demonstrations probably more easy to listen to and to interpret if you haven't taken the basic color theory. So this is a really great site, the first one. And then the other two are kind of focus in on different elements of color and design. This one's specific to digital design. So after you read the first one and glance through that, read through this one, and they're all pretty short. But it talks about color also and user interface design. So you can relate this to print, graphic design, digital design, and then also the interfaces that you use, whether it be Zoom or Photoshop or anything else, why they made the color choices for those applications, which is all part of digital design. So this goes through all the separate colors and why you might want to use some over others to get a certain feeling across. And then finally, why is blue so popular in interface design? This is an interesting article by an interface designer. So if you look at Photoshop and any other program, usually it's blue that they invite you in with. Why is that? The different shades of blue affect people psychologically in different ways. And that's a whole field in advertising that people can choose to focus on. I met a woman in Westport that did nothing for her entire career in New York City, and she was paid really well for just to decide color trends for every year and how different colors work in different design situations, all the way from user interface design to fashion design and packaging and bundling colors that might be trendy for another year to advise people with. So it's an interesting field, but that's one folder that will help you with this assignment. And then in readings again, contemporary surrealist artists. We're gonna look at a video here. This is Maggie Taylor, who's, to me, she doesn't call herself a surrealist artist, but she is. And the reason we're gonna look at that is because it relates to our new assignment. So in current assignments, the new one is going to be, this time you're going to use the full range of Photoshop colors, but you can narrow them down to get a certain feeling across if you want to use a limited palette like in some of those articles. But the concept for this is common dreams. So you can interpret that literally as a dream or a nightmare. And it can also be maybe the, the definition of dreams as aspirations or hoping for the future. But that's the core illustration concept. And here's the tool outcomes. We're going to learn a few new ones, go back over old ones because we're going to go back into that process of collaging again, this time with color. So read through the two folders first. And you're going to use at least 5 images from different sources for this collage for more practice and for building up more in the layer stack and working with multiple layers and getting used to that and finessing that. So you can use your own images for this too. Does anybody have a scanner? Because you can scan images if you'd like to do that, or old photographs for this. If you don't, you can use, everything can be found images. That's up to you, or it can be a combination of original images and found images, and that's entirely up to you. But Photoshop kind of lends itself to these dream-like surrealist, and surrealism is just placing different parts of different images together to create a new reality. That's why it's called surrealism. It's usually collage in nature because different parts are pieced together to create that new reality. Sometimes it can just be a strangeness or an uncommonness, maybe setting up a photo scene in an unusual place with a subject that maybe doesn't fit there, but so the viewer has to do some interpreting. So it's got that element of surprise and mystery about it. So that's kind of what you're going for here. And we'll look at somebody that works with that idea and feeling. And here's the step-by-step instructions again for this. It's pretty much the same as the others with just a couple of new tools that you can choose to use, like layer styles that we'll look at for drop shadows and stuff like that. So that's in your current assignments, and you can read through that. The other thing before we go into the videos is to go back here to your instructional videos and PowerPoints. Because we are using copyright-free imagery, hopefully, or we're doing found images, here's a couple of sites that are really great for found images, Pexels or Pixabay. And I won't click on them because it's just going to take me to another window, but it allows you to go to a copyright-free page that has really high quality background images and foreground images, and you can download those to your desktop. Usually all they ask in exchange, the artist's name is on those. They're giving away their images for free on these sites. Sometimes they'll ask for a cup of coffee or just a mention on Instagram or something like that. So either one of those is a good one to use. You can use both, but that's a way to get royalty-free, copyright-free images that you can put out and not feel that somebody's going to, you know, worry that you've taken their image from the internet. So use those if you can. And in my demo illustration, I have used those, so we can look at that. And you can also look for images that have come from copyright-free resources and libraries, like those old photographs that have been released from the Victorian era postcards. Those are nice, and there's a lot of those online. Okay, so back to our readings. And this time the contemporary surrealist artists for our inspiration, there's Maggie Taylor. And she uses a lot of those old photographs. She's amazing. And this is her website. She's got a ton of work on here, but she scans and uses found images. Whoops. And she always just changes up her website, so it's hard to find series. Let's see, I like her animal. She does book illustrations, so there's a lot of different ones that focus on different fairy tales. But she uses old photographs that she scans and then uses found objects that she scans and then found images that she finds online and merges them all with Photoshop. So she's very well known as being a Photoshop surrealist. And she's been around for many decades creating these very similar looking images as a body of work. So her illustration style is well known and pretty influential. And she's married to Jerry Yulesman, the artist that we looked at last week that does the black and white surrealist photography, who was consulted by Photoshop but doesn't really like Photoshop. So they have an interesting relationship. And we're gonna watch a video about her and her work for about 8 minutes. So I'm gonna switch back over to that and we'll see how that plays. And this is the two of them discussing their process with their computers and how they collage work together to create these contemporary surrealist images. Okay, and this is in Vimeo.
I'm constantly collecting daguerreotypes and other old photographs that I can scan and use. I still see them as wonderful antique people that can tell their own stories. I like the idea that the people have a very ethereal, dreamlike quality to me. When I look at them and I see particularly the women in the dark dresses or the men in the rather fancy suits with the bow ties and the big collars, I see them as characters from a novel of a non-specific era. And then I'm collecting junk and things from the garden or whatever other things. And sometimes I use little dead things like a dead bird or butterfly wings or things that I found in the yard. I like the idea of including animals right along with the people in my work, whether it's a person who has turned into a bird or some other animal. And I just like the playful and also mythological implications of that kind of thing. I'm often just like juggling things around trying to find out what makes sense in a particular image, and it might just be an animal. I want it to be a really cohesive visual space that is like inviting the viewer in, almost as if you're looking at a painting. People can look at it and digest it and make sense of the narrative in some way. And then it brings up their own personal associations. One of the things that I do with the camera is go out and collect background elements to add textures and add a sense of space to something. I love to photograph clouds and different kinds of weather, particularly on this big, flat, horizontal Florida landscape. There's a good place nearby where I can take a walk and take my camera, and it's different every time you go there. You don't know whether it's going to be all plain blue sky, or there might be little storybook puffy clouds, or it might be a really stormy day. One of the toughest things with working with the computer is that you could just keep going back to the same thing, you know, day after day, and changing it and finessing it and coming up with something completely different every day. For me, I work on something for usually at least a few weeks, if not a month, and in some cases 3 months or 4 months. But when I get to the point that I've made a print, and then I've gone back and looked at the print and evaluated it and worked some more and made another print, then I know I'm getting kind of close to being finished with it. I always need other people's input, so mainly Jerry looks at my work.
You've done nice modeling on the face. I think you've worked out the sky nice, the transition there, and the tree has kind of glow to it. And you've rounded out her face. I think that looks good. There's more tone in her hair now.
Yeah, she's done.
Great, yeah. We're both image makers, and we get suggestions from each other. Once the image starts, then it's interesting to get input, because sometimes it's like you can't see the forest for the trees, sort of thing.
He knows this tree looks really too big for that landscape, or this object, you have the wrong perspective on it. It needs to be warped this way or that way, or this one thing is way too light in the landscape, or this is way too dark. So he can usually look at things sort of from a totally different perspective than I'm looking at them when I'm sitting staring at them all day in the computer. I don't feel like I have to consider myself anything except an image maker. I don't really feel the need to categorize my work, and in terms of whether it's photography or not, or whether it's surrealism or not. I sort of feel like all of that is up to art historians or critics or someone who has to write about it. For me, the most essential thing is just to keep up the energy to keep making art and keep having ideas that I want to translate into visual images.
Okay. So that music is putting me to sleep, but I love the images. So I guess we're going to take a break. Now you can grab a cup of coffee or do whatever you need to do, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes. And then I'm going to go through a demonstration for the color collaging process you're going to use this week. It took me a couple of hours to put together the demo image, but I'm not going to take that long with it. We'll just go through it in about a half an hour just to get the basics for you, and then you can work on your own stuff. So any questions before we take a break? All right, I'll see you at a couple minutes after 3. Okay, back again. I hope people are still here. This is always so strange, but okay. I'm gonna go into the demonstration and share screens with Photoshop. And if you want to find some practice images to work with and follow along, if that helps you out, you can do that, or you can just watch and then look at it again later when you're working. That's up to you. So I'm going to go to share screen. And once I do that, I'm going to go into the demonstration with the collaged image, sort of in the style of Maggie Taylor, with some elements from Pixabay, from old photographs like she uses, and other animal pictures. So here we go to get kind of a dreamlike image. So here's the one that, oops, there we go, I was working on. And it probably took 2 or 3 hours to put together with all these different elements. Let me put this up to the top. Okay. And you can ask questions. Stop me at any time if you have a question about something, if I go too fast with it. But the different layers that were used to put together this image are over here in the layer stack. And again, if you don't see that layers menu come up, you want to go up to Window, pull down menu, make sure layers is clicked so you can see this menu over here, because that is the most crucial menu to have up when you're working in Photoshop, because that, if you are, every time you bring in a new image, it's going to automatically create a new layer. And if you don't have the layers menu open to show you what's what, you're going to get mixed up between what is in layers, because you must select the layer that has the information in it that you want to work with. And it allows you to click on the names of the different layers to select them in the stack. So if you're trying to, for instance, work on this layer that says elephant, but it's not selected, it's not going to allow you to work on it. And that can be really frustrating, but that's just something that you get used to as you work with Photoshop more. But the layers are sort of the foundation of the program, so that should always be open. And then I have my color menu open, because that has the sliding scale where I can choose all the millions of Photoshop colors between this hue slider, which is the type of color along the spectrum, and then the value slider, which adds either white or black or gray to the color to give you your swatch color that your current paintbrush is going to be. That's right here. So that's another important palette that I leave open, although I may not use it too much since we're not drawing so much in this one. But you can use hand-drawn elements in your collage if you choose to. So that color palette is a good one for selecting your paintbrush color. So the way that this was put together, I found a foundation image, and I'll just turn up all the different layers. Some I already deactivated. I had an elephant in here that I didn't like, and some other things. So I'm just going to deactivate temporarily the layers so you can see what's underneath them and how it was constructed. There goes the lizard. There goes the, I had 2 lions stacked on top of one another to make it look like the little girl on the head was sandwiched between them. So I just turned off one, then the little girl. So there's still a lion layer there. As I get down in the layer stack, there that goes. And then down at the bottom was something over to the left. I think a duplicate of that face. And then the girl to the right. Let's see, she's up on the top somewhere. Still turned on, there she goes. Okay, so at the bottom, I found a foundation image first. I find that with Photoshop collaging, it always helps to have a foundation image that is somewhat in the vein of the composition that you want to create. And you can see in Maggie Taylor's work in the video that we just looked at, she always sort of brings in a landscape that has a distinct horizon, or a tree as a focal point in the background that dominates the design. And that already holds together as a nice composition for her design. So sometimes you'll see Photoshop collages and you can tell right away that they're Photoshop, where there's a lot of disparate elements, sort of maybe 5 or 6 different ideas or images pieced together, and maybe just a flat color or white. And they always look like they're falling apart, that there's nothing holding them together because they don't have a founding image. But it's that founding image strength in that really brings together the rest of the elements that you bring into your Photoshop collage. So Maggie Taylor said she goes out and photographs her own images, which is one way to do it. And then you have that original image as your foundation. So that's good. This one I found on Pexels. It's copyright free. I said a thank you to the artist that made it because I think it's beautiful. And you can kind of, if you look at it, see how it's constructed. It's a photograph of a castle door. And then here, it was a he put in the overlay of the clocks and gears and then erased through the clocks and gears to bring the door back out. So already this is a collage that somebody posted, and it makes a nice foundation image. If I was going to do this, you know, commercially or to show some to sell, I would create my own foundation collage with those elements. But for speed, for doing production illustration or just practicing, these are really great, and it's copyright free, guilt free. So I like the composition of it though, with the arch and the kind of consecutive arches that I'll already, with a focal point up here in the left-hand corner, sets the design. So whatever I add to it is going to be based on that foundation structure. So the next layer is this clock that I brought in to unite the girl that was here and then the lizard. And that came from, let me bring it in again. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to File, Place Embedded. And here's the original image of the clock. This came from Pexabay. So it's copyright free also. But it's really big, high resolution, which is good. It's always better to scale things down when you add a new layer than to stretch them up. And this is why we do place embedded. If I just dragged this in to my workspace directly from my folder, it would already come in small. So anything that I wanted to do to enlarge it, I'd be losing pixel data and clarity. But shrinking it down, you don't lose that as much. Anyway, it stays clear, still a smart object until I get rid of that designation. And the smart object also sizes things with clarity. So I'm going to hit return to set this. And this is something that comes up all the time when we first start working with layers. If I was to click on another layer or to go on to something else, it would either give me a warning or go on and it wouldn't save this image. You have to return once you set the size, what you want it, you set it by hitting return from the keyboard. That will take off those little corner highlight areas that designate it's still floating, and set it. Now it becomes, you can see that it's still designated as a smart object. It's got this little tiny square over to the right on the icon for this particular layer. So before I keep work on it anymore, I'm going to go up to layers and rasterize and take off the smart object. I'm done sizing it. I don't need it to be, you know, crispy clear anymore, but I want to work on it. I want to get rid of that black background. So I'm going to take off the smart object and designation, and now it's freed up to work on it. So I want to get rid of this black background, and because this is an object set on black or a flat color, one color, it's easy to get rid of with your selection tools like we did last week. I could use either the magic wand tool or the object selection tool. So for this one, I guess I'll try magic wand tool, which just selects on the basis of color. And if I click on black, the way that this is set up now in your options, it will take the first black and the next nearest 12. And then I have this word contiguous clicked. And if you're having problems with this, for instance, if I unclick this and then click on black, it's picking up everything that's in that selection, all the blacks in the next 12 closest. And I don't want that. When it hits the edge here, I just want the background to go. I don't want the blacks in the clock to go. So I'm going to deselect that, Command D, and then go up to contiguous and click that. And that means when it's contiguous, it'll take contiguous pixels that are sitting next to one another. When it confronts a contrasting one, it will stop. So now it stops at the edge where there's that gold color, and that looks much better. And then I can just hit delete from the keyboard. If you have a PC, your delete key is probably over to the right in your numeric pad. So once you hit that, then you've got a floating object on the background. Whoops. And if you want to change its position, you can go up to the move tool, which you're always going back to in Photoshop, this little cross tool, and shift it to a new space. And I like the way that looks, but it still looks like it's kind of floating, and I want it to look more like it's embedded in the design. So I could paint a shadow around it on the background, but there's a better way to maybe make that look like it's got a foundation shadow. And we didn't do this last time, it's layer styles. So that's a new tool. You can see over here in the layer stack, here's the layer that's got the clock information. It's just a small object surrounded by transparency. If I go up to the layers pull down menu now and go to layer style, I have all these new menu items that I can use under layer style to enhance how that's interacting with the image behind it. So what I want for this one is a drop shadow to create a shadow that looks like it's going in the opposite direction of where the light's being cast in this picture, which is coming from the upper left, both on this clock and really in this scene. And it always helps in any design to set your light direction, which way you think it's coming from, and keep that consistent throughout, because that makes a more believable scene. And that's another element of unity, that design element that we talked about that helps pull everything together and make it look believable, even though it's a fantasy picture. So I'm checking drop shadows here. These layer styles are cumulative. You can apply many to one layer object. And then underneath the swatch for that layer in the layer stack, you'll see all the different layer styles that you've added there. And you can go back in and tweak them by clicking on them once you're done. So it's a really nice feature of Photoshop. This one, when I first put the drop shadow in, it's a dark color. So using normal, darken, multiply will all show that color. I could put a light drop shadow in, like light being cast, but I would have to click a light color and then change the blend type to lighten to get that to show up. But first, we'll start with the dark drop shadow. And this angle is asking which direction the light's coming from. So I'm pointing into this upper left-hand corner like the clock. And then size is the amount of pixels that's spread out from the object. And then there's the opacity again. Photoshop has this in many menus that give you the intensity of the effect. So if I go all the way up to 100%, oops. Yeah, it looks pretty dark. It's giving a cast shadow back into this that makes this wall up here look more cavernous, which I like. And it looks like it's more united with the shadows that are already in the image. So I really do like that. And I'm gonna leave that for now. You can also change the distance. And then the spread is the intensity also of how thick your shadow looks. And when I start to push this up, I think it's too much. It's starting to become a focal point that's too intense because it's just black and it's taking away all my texture. So I'm gonna get rid of that and just leave the size as a large size and say, okay. And as soon as I set that, I have the drop shadow designation underneath the swatch for that layer. And if I click on it, it'll take me, or if I click twice on it, back to that menu, and I can change that drop shadow at any time. Okay, so that was another layer that went in, now adding to the foundation. Okay, so I added this sort of middle-aged woman over here, like she's looking into the scene of things that have happened in the past. and added her up into that upper left-hand corner. And she came in as just an old photograph. So I'm going to go back and get her again. Whoops. After I turn off her layer. Okay, so I'm going back up to File, Place Embedded. And I'm looking for this woman again who is black and white, I think. Yeah, so this is what the original image looked like. So I wanted her facing into the composition, not looking out of it. So the first thing I did, well, first I have to set her size, and I wanted her to kind of fit up into the circle. So I shrunk her down a little bit and then hit return. Then go back up to layer, rasterize, smart object to take off the smart object designations. You can flip her. And then going back up to that other Photoshop menu that you'll use a lot, and that's transform, because that allows me to change the size on this floating layer, rotate it, skew it, and also flip it horizontally, which is what I want to do here. And then I moved her kind of up in the place that I thought I wanted her before I started using the eraser. So what helps when you're using the erase tool, which is what I tend to do to get rid of all this surrounding area, because it's not flat color like that other clock, so I can just zap it with the magic wand tool. I have to go around and erase it because it's got a very complex grayscale. So I'm going to first make her a little bit semi-transparent so I can see what's going on underneath before I start erasing. And that just gives me a little hint here where I can see some of the background coming through, so I know where I can erase, you know, around where I want her to connect with the background. And then I'm going to go back to the eraser tool, which is right here. It looks kind of like that double rectangle, black and white. And then I'm going to choose a brush size for that. Up here in the options menu, just like you would do for the paintbrush. So I want a fairly large, and this gives you a preview when you bring your cursor back over into the window, how large the brush is going to be. And soft edged brush that's pretty, I'm going to start out at 100% opacity up here in the slider for the options. And that can be really confusing because when you're in the eraser, opacity means intensity of erasing. In other menus, it means the density of the color as a replacement color. So it's the opposite, but it's just the intensity of the tool. And that's probably a better way to think of it. So I'm going to get rid of the majority of the edge with that. And then as I get closer in, I'm going to go back up and lower the intensity of this tool to about 30%. So now when I go in, I have to go over and over certain areas to get another 30%, but it gives me a much more subtle blending. And I can see sort of how much of the background I want coming through, because I do want some of it because it makes an interesting combination, I think, of the two images, but I don't want it to be completely through. So it helps to have this at a lower opacity. And then for the overall opacity for her face, because I'd like some of the background maybe to come through there, I'm going to go in and change the opacity over here that changes it for the whole layer. And that's a smoother effect down to about 70, so I can see some of the background coming through her face. So she's very subtle. Okay, so I'm going to go back and find the stop clock. There it is. And then some of the other elements that were there. The other thing I did want to show was the lion. I started out with this stock photo. This also came from, is it iStock Pexels, one or the other. And then erased around him. I smudged his hair around a little bit to make it look more natural. Hair is something that's really tricky, and we'll practice that more in other classes. But if you have kind of a cut edge after using the eraser around something with hair, you can go back in and use the smudge tool that we used last week with a nice textured paintbrush. And if I go up here, let's see if I can find some different ones. There we go. Whoop. Okay, I'm gonna shrink that down. And then put the hardness up. And that's pretty small, but I can just keep pulling out the hair, just like Anthony did with the heart on the illustration there, to give a more directional look to the hair so it doesn't look like it's a flat torn paper edge. It looks like it's actually got strands emanating out into the areas of transparency. And it helps to leave this on 50% strength or intensity of the brush and then just keep pulling out from the edges. Okay. So that can be time consuming, but it's worth it if you're looking for that sense of unity with the illustration. That's another technique that can help give that between a background and a foreground image. Because as I keep pulling out the strands, it looks like they're semi-transparent and blending more with the background as a transparent blend that looks more like hair does when it's in the light. Using the trackpad to do this is not a good idea. It's going to give me arthritis. Okay, so there's one lion that I had in the stack, and then I had another lion. I duplicated the same layer like we did last week. And you can do that either in your layers menu up here in the pull down menu. You can say duplicate layer, which will multiply the lion that's there already. Or I can do that over here, duplicate layer, and it just makes an exact copy of the layer that you had currently selected and puts it on top of it. And the reason why I did that was because I brought in that photo of the little girl. And when I first brought her in, it looked like she was standing on top of the lion's head like this, where her feet were just kind of touching the head, but it looked weird. I tried making her feet look more transparent so that some of the head showed through, and I put a drop shadow underneath that was kind of red in color, but none of that worked. It still looked like she's hovering on top of the lion. So in order to get rid of that look, I made two lions and then clicked, oops, and dragged the top one on top of the little girl. And that changed the order of the layer stack. So over in the picture, now the lion is on top of the girl and there's another one below her. And on this top lion, now I'd go get another eraser and use a large soft edge eraser and then just erase through. So some of the lion's still showing, but it looks more natural, like she's kind of blending into the hair or standing inside the hair instead of such an abrupt sort of floating look to her. And I might bring a little bit more of her feet back. So that's something I would probably spend more time on, but that went too far, I think. I might use the smudge tool again to drag up some of these hair, but I won't do that now. It kind of looks like it's embedded the way that I wanted it to. It's a better look. Okay, so let's see the next element in this. I think there was 5 total, 5 or 6. Was this lizardy creature. Yeah, it was this one. I started out with this one was the original shape. Whoops. When I brought it in, and then I used the warp tool, which is in your transform menu, to bend it, but I didn't like the way it distorted the image. So I ended up deactivating that one and then bringing in the original again. And then I just moved it over and bent it a little bit with distort, which is, whoops. Under edit, transform, and warp. Oh, wrong layer. Okay, salamander. Okay, warp is a great tool in Photoshop and much better in this newest version. Before you had kind of a grid where you had to pull around points. This allows you just to push on an image and it becomes fluid. You can kind of bend it in a really natural looking way for organic objects and really match something to the composition that you have. I wanted that bend around this curve of the door, and this is a really good tool for doing that. I mean, you'll get to a point where if you bend it too much, like the other one that I had here, you'll lose the image. It gets pinched and it doesn't really come back with the warp tool. You have to just undo and start again. But it can be really nice for just conforming something to a design like this. So I wanted these two arches to unite here for that sense of unity again. And then just hit return to set this, just like when you're pasting down a placed object. And then this originally had a look that was kind of, it just looked abrupt because of all these highlights didn't work with the highlight directional light that was coming in, and it would be too hard to fix it with the burn tool. So I just ended up going back up to a layer effect and added that in there. And the layer effect I used was outer glow. And it's the opposite kind of a drop shadow. And that just allows you to, if I click twice on that word outer glow, I get the menu, pick a color, or it can be a shadow, or it can be a light color like this. And then I chose blend mode lighten because it is a light color, or it would work on normal. And then just changed up the size and the spread to get that light color that had been around that when it first came in. And now it's, let me go back to outer glow here and see if I can retrieve it. Like a new style. So I would need to take that off of that layer before I can add the new glow in there, but that's another use for that layer style that's really, really a nice feature of Photoshop. So I'm gonna go back and just start with that salamander when I first brought him in. So I'm deactivating that one and now going back up to File, Place Embedded. So you can see again how the rotate and everything works in the transform. So here comes the salamander in as a floating smart object. And before I place it, because it's still a smart object, if I let my cursor hover around the corner, it turns into a bent double arrow, which means I can rotate it around. And I'm trying to just get it in the basic position that I want it. And then I'm going to just grab the corners and pull it in like a regular size tool when you first bring in a placed object. And this salamander already had the transparency around it. I looked for images. If you can find copyright-free images that already are like that, and there's a lot of them on the internet, then it makes things so much easier because you don't have to do all that cutting so much yourself. And then hitting return here. This one has the transparency screen indicator on it, which is a little annoying. So I'm gonna go up to Layer, Rasterize Smart Object, get rid of that. And for this one, if I try to use Magic Wand tool, it's going to select the first white or gray that I pick up on, but because this grid is still apparent here, I get multiple selections. I could hold the Shift key down and keep trying to add to the original selection till I get all the whites and grays selected, but that can be time consuming and not as accurate. Well, actually that worked pretty well there. So that's one option. I just hold the Shift key down and keep clicking. So I'm going to deselect that and instead go up to the object selection tool and see if that doesn't work better, or quick selection. So I'm putting a box around the whole object. and it's going to analyze it and try to figure out what's the object and what's the background. And this may not work because I've got a lot of transparency. It's just kind of picking up on some of the background. So I could try to add to this by holding the shift key down again and trying to get a closer selection, or using it as a lasso tool rather than a box, which you have the choice to do up here in the options. So now I can draw kind of a general line around the outside so it won't get as confused, and see if it pops onto the object. So that's pretty good as far as the selection goes. And I really like this new tool, the object selection, because it's very accurate, but you have to do one extra step with it, because right now it's selected the object, not the background, and the background is what I want to get rid of. So I need to go up to select menu and say inverse. And now it's selecting everything but the object. So when I hit delete on this layer, it's getting rid of that background. And now I'm deselecting, and that's pretty much where I wanted the salamander. But again, it doesn't really look like it belongs in the image. So I'm going to go up, and it needs a little bit, the grayscale isn't the same. The image behind it has much darker blacks in it, like these puffballs here and some of this area over here. So back to the adjustment tools that we used last week, and brightness and contrast that help you change the quality of a photograph, the grayscale of it. So the quality I want here is more contrasty. I mean, yeah, a little bit more contrast and a little less brightness. So that looks like it blends in better with that darkened scene. And then I want to shrink it just a little bit more so it's not sitting over the top of her eye. And sometimes you'll see some of the image that you didn't select and cut off at the beginning pop through if you resize something, and that's fine. You can just go back to, in this case, I'm just picking the rectangular selection tool. All 4 tools up here, or 3 tools at the top of your toolbar, are for selections, selecting out areas that you want to do things to. So I'm just selecting out that little white part that's coming back in with the box, and then hitting delete, and that gets rid of just that area. And now I'm going to go back to the magic wand tool, and there were a couple little areas of white or gray inside the armpit of this creature that I'm going to take out with that, and then delete. Okay. So I kind of like the way it's blending in now. It's got like these little white edges though that still bother me in this line up here. And I could use the burn tool like we did last week to go in and blend those in so they're dark. But I think I want to separate it out from the background a little bit more. So that's why I used the layer style that I had on there before. So now I'm going to go back and add it into this layer. And again, this works best with a fresh layer that you just bring in. They can start, when you build them up, get tricky to work with. But I'm going into layer style. And instead of drop shadow, I'm going to outer glow. And then I picked a yellow that kind of matched the color of the spots in the salamander to create some unity there. I mean, there's a lot of gold and black in this design, and I wanted to keep that deliberately, not add a lot of blue or anything that's distracting, or purple from that palette. There's some subtle blues in here, but the dominant color palette is brown, gold, and orange, and red, those warm colors. So I wanted to keep that. And I put this on dissolve to give kind of a grainy look to it. In the blend mode, I'm not sure if I like it. I'll try some other ones. I kind of like it because it looks like paper, or that's not too bad. That's a little more subtle, light, and then I'm going to make this very transparent, less intense, the effect. I just want a little bit of glow that brings it, makes those highlights make sense. Like there's some kind of light source coming up from above that's hitting the salamander. So I would probably work on this a little bit more. It's starting to unite, I think, with the background and the watch. So I'm going to leave it for now, but that's how you use the layer styles. And it's best just to sort of experiment with them, bring up an image that's a floating image on a layer and just go through those all and try them and play with them. And a lot of Photoshop is like that, play with it. Try not to get too intimidated by it. There's nothing you can do once you've saved your image to wreck your image. Just go back and play with it. And then you can always decide you don't want to save it. So bring up a test image and try everything out before you go into your finished image. That's another way to kind of get around getting frustrated with Photoshop, because there's so many choices. It can be overwhelming. And it just takes a lot of practice and time to get used to Photoshop, so you're making deliberate choices for the effect that you want to communicate to your intended audience. Okay, so back to this layer stack. I think I had one more person in here. There she is. She's like this shadowy girl. And let's see. Whoops. Okay, that was one that I decided not to use. But she had a drop shadow to her too. So I'm gonna bring her in from the start. And you can see what she looked like originally, place embedded. And I don't know if I see her original there. I may not be able to bring her back the way that she was. So let me go back to the layer. And you can kind of see I've made duplicates of her, because the first one I brought her in and she looked very bright and she had kind of harsh edges around her. So I went back up to layer styles and added a drop shadow. I wanted to bring in the feeling of light coming from the upper left and then leaving the shadow along this side and then being cast back on these clocks. So it leaves a definite dark line here that kind of becomes a focal point of its own. It leads the eye up and around the clock and then over the archway and then the arch of the salamander over here into the woman's face, and then brings your eye back down and around the lion. I mean, in this case, to me, the lion is bright and probably the most contrasty part of this image, but it's really not the focal point, just the way that it's set up. Because this background foundation already had this really dominant arching shape, and I wanted to exaggerate through that throughout. I'm hoping that is the focal point. And then the eye goes in this direction from this focal point line all the way up and around and then back to the lion as being the sort of secondary or final focal point. So to do that more, I thought she was very light after I added the shadow to her, and she was kind of a bland color palette when she first came in without a lot of lights or darks. So I put one version of her normal and then duplicated that layer again just to pump up the brightness. And if you have an image like this, that can help sometimes. When I first tried to change the contrast without duplicating the layer, I was just losing some of the information on her. And it was looking too bland, and I had also changed with the drop shadow the relationship of the gray around her to her edges. So I just duplicated the layer and then pumped up the contrast on the top layer to create more glow on the left-hand side. And I would work on this image a lot more. If this was something I was going to do as a finished image, I would probably erase more under here. There's still some residual shadow underneath this arm that's bothering me. I'd go up and probably use the dodge tool or burn tool on some parts of this lizard to incorporate it more. But I like the way the composition is coming out. So at this point I would save it. And again, I can't emphasize enough, save your layered copy if you want to work on this again and create different versions of it. And I'm going to go up to File and Save As, save on my computer. And I've already saved this one, and I'm not going to save over the other one, but I would just name it and then leave the format as Photoshop, save it with the layers checked, and that gives you a working file that you can always come back to. And there may be reasons why you want to do this. If you work as a production illustrator, you may use this technique a lot. I have in the past for magazine covers, for workbooks, and social studies books for kids. And sometimes the political content would change from week to week or month to month was our publication schedule. And instead of having to recreate an image from scratch, if a person had to be taken out or a city had to be changed, because I had a layered file like this, I could just take out the one layer and add in the new content. If I had not saved the layered version, I would have had to go back and build the whole image from scratch. And where you're being paid by illustration, you don't want to do that because your hourly wage is terrible. So you're always thinking, if you're doing that kind of production work, how can I be efficient? How can I, do things faster so you get paid more? It's just, with your own artwork, you can take your time, and that's not such an issue, but still, you don't want to lose your original content. You may want to go back and get an idea about it and get excited about it, and then you can't change it. So save the layered version, and then you can change it. And then if this was the one I wanted to send out as a finished image, I like the way it looks on the screen, I'm going to go back up and save the JPEG version of it, because with a JPEG, what you see on the screen is what you get in your file, and it's flat. You don't have a layers option as a JPEG. But the advantage to the file format is that it's small, easy to upload to social media, to Blackboard, and to share with people. And sometimes that's the format that people want when they're doing professional printing for you. So it's a good flat and small format to email or upload on somebody else's website if they're doing printing. So I'm going to do this one, change it to number 2 because I already have one there that I like better. I don't want to save over that file. And then just save it in my folder. And then again, with a JPEG image, you're always going to get this slider that asks you what quality you want, as opposed to, in conjunction with, I should say, what file size you want. So right now, here's the file size. Down here, those TD numbers is 2.1 megabyte, which is a really good size for uploading to Blackboard or to email somebody. But I want this to be higher quality. You're always, the lower quality you make, the smaller the file size. And that might be a consideration, but this time I want to place it up at the highest possible quality maximum, because say I'm going to go to print it, or I'm going to send it to a commercial printer, and 6 megabytes is not big for that kind of situation, so it's fine. And I'm going to leave baseline standard as just the way the pixels are arranged to give the best quality image. If you do baseline optimized, it's going to optimize the pixels for web presentation, and that's always, it's harder to get an image back to standard once you've optimized it. So if you place it out there on the internet and maybe you lose the file and you try to go get the optimized version off the internet, it's not going to print as well. But it's really hardly noticeable in the resolutions that we're working at. So I'm just clicking OK here, and standard baseline format, maximum quality, and then OK. Okay, so now I have 2 versions of this, a working file, and I have the JPEG image that I can bring into Blackboard. And also another good reason to save your layered version, your Photoshop document version, is that if you don't feel like your image is entirely finished, or that you're satisfied with it and you want to work on it throughout the semester and then submit it later for your final portfolio, that way you'll have the layered version. You can go back in and tweak it and then just resave it as a JPEG after you've done that, and then upload it again to your final portfolio. So I think I'm going to end the demonstration here. That's a lot of stuff to practice with for the next 2 weeks. So next class, we'll go back through, maybe I'll build a different image with the same idea of dreams, back through some of the layers and layer styles, and we'll look at some filters also that can give you some different textures or effects, exciting effects for lighting effects in your image. So, but I'm going to end this one for now. So let me stop the share. Okay, so do you have any questions at all? All right, if you don't have any other questions, we can quit for now. I'm going to take the recording of the demonstration. I'll edit it so there's not the beginning in there, and then put it on Blackboard. So if you're confused, just sit through the demonstration. You can, at least fast forward through and pick up the parts that you are interested in watching, and do it that way. But if you have any questions during the week or over the weekend, you can always email me and we'll try to resolve what you've got going on. Also on Tuesday, I'm going to have the optional class again. It's entirely optional, but if you find you try this assignment and you're running into something that's problematic, we can just sit and go through it individually. It's usually, probably going to be 1 or 2 people on the optional day. So that's a good time to get personalized help, and you can share your screen. So think about doing that. But if there's no questions, and I'm looking in the chat, I don't see any, I'm going to quit for now. And then I will see you maybe on Tuesday, but otherwise next Thursday. And I look forward to seeing your work on this assignment. I think it should be really interesting. And congratulations to those that sent in the black and white images, because those are very impressive for beginning Photoshop. They're really, really nice. So, okay, I will see you. Have a good weekend.